Hey you guys, what's up? I'm Ashley from heavenathome.org, and this is the Heaven at Home podcast, where my goal is to encourage you in your personal growth journey while being open, honest, and owning my story. We have faith-based conversations and tackle a bunch of different tough topics. Check out the description to follow me and learn more. Remember, you are fully known and deeply loved. Let's do this. A couple weeks ago, I was dying. I realized why I don't talk to people, why I keep my comments, questions, and concerns to myself. Because when I really allow myself to be open, even to just a conversation, even just a little bit feels like too much. I can't guarantee that I can close off enough to not just break down entirely. And I've cried a long time. I've been crying for years. I've cried so hard at times. Like it made me sick, literally sick. I could not keep food down. And I've been kind of perplexed recently because 2022 was probably the happiest, healthiest year I had in a while. But that doesn't mean that it didn't look a lot like 2021, and 2021 a lot like 2020, and 2020 like 2019. And to this day, I get frustrated with myself. I'm like, why am I still crying? For the love of God, why am I still crying? And there were people in my life in a certain season who told me one thing, and now they're telling me something else, or they're not saying anything at all. And I think to myself, I'm over this. I'm over him. I'm over my losses. Why am I still crying? Why hasn't the pain stopped? Why hasn't it gone away? And then I get lost in the feeling of loss itself. And feeling like I'm losing my daughter. And my next thought is to think, okay, like my pain and my sorrow and my grief is just a consequence. The people in my life who told me to fight, now they're telling me to get over it, to let it go. And so for me to be dealing with these emotions right now, it's not acceptable anymore. It doesn't make sense anymore. And I'm very careful to think of what others might say and what others might think and how others might perceive me. And I have a super bad habit of adopting those things for myself. And in this moment where I'm asking, why am I still in pain? Why am I still in pain? I kind of felt like God was like, you give yourself no grace. You give yourself no compassion. You feel like you've been mourning for so long, but you haven't. In reality, you barely gave yourself a year to mourn your marriage. The years before that, you were fighting through tears. You may have mourned your marriage, but you haven't mourned motherhood. You haven't mourned this. I'm realizing that all my prayer requests, for the most part, have been, like my most honest prayers, the heart of every request I come up with is basically, God, can you just make it so that it doesn't hurt anymore? Can you just make it so that there's no pain? Can you just take the pain away? And after having that moment breaking down in the way that I used to be so familiar with, I was like, that's it. I've had it. Like, no more. Just no more. If I had to verbalize some of the things I felt like God was saying to me these past weeks, it's that I need to let go. And really letting go means really mourning. And really mourning means really depending. And really depending means depending on God completely. And when I was married, I was so much more intentional about remaining tenderhearted. Like, it was an active, conscious, intentional process. And since then, I feel very deeply that I'm supposed to give God all these bits and pieces of myself. This is the kind of image that comes to mind. I don't know if you've ever, seen those scenes in movies where there's like a gunshot in some place, but it's hit something very important. And so everything's just kind of gushing out, pouring out. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, this is such a small thing. It's just a little wound. It's tiny. And God is like, nah, like, you are bleeding out here. You are bleeding out here. So stop trying to hide that you're hurting. And now that I'm sharing this, I'm remembering like 2 separate occasions as a kid, both at school, actually. The first occasion, I was in class, the teacher was teaching something, and I got up to sharpen my pencil, super, super sharp. And when I was done pulling it out from the sharpener, I accidentally stabbed my ring finger, and it started bleeding like a lot. But the teacher was teaching, and I didn't want to interrupt or anything, so I waited until she was done to let her know that I was like bleeding a lot. And then there was like this other occasion where I was in class, and I don't remember like the full context, but I was given a lollipop, and I was kind of pulling on it with my teeth, and the whole thing came off. It went right to the back of my throat, and I thought I was choking, but I didn't want to tell anyone, and I didn't want anyone to see, and I didn't want anyone to notice, because I was embarrassed. Like, how embarrassing is it that I'm like choking on some candy right now? And so I remember facing the corner of the classroom. I was like, nah, if anyone's gonna find me, it's gonna be because I passed out or something. I'm like, okay, why am I like this? Why am I like this? And so I remember in early March of this year, I was kind of walking through a process. I was transitioning into a new job, which would allow me to be more available and more flexible as a parent. And it was, I don't know, the actual mechanics of my life right now was just a little bit overwhelming at the time. Like, how are things going to work? How am I going to do this? And I remember like almost having this attitude like in my soul, like it was very, very deep, that I just didn't want anything to get in the way anymore of me being able to be there for my daughter in whichever way was necessary, however often was necessary. For those of you guys who don't know, she has very high needs, autism. Her schedule is very different. So I was kind of dealing with that stuff at the time. And I don't remember too much else about the actual day, but I remember I think I was on the couch, just chilling, just relaxing. And then all of a sudden I feel something welling up inside of me. And I'm trying to choke it down. Like, I am just trying to keep this pain away, like for the life of me. But I can't. And I just start crying, weeping, wailing, turning over, just completely restless. And one thing that always used to mind boggle me in these past seasons was just the way that I cried. Like, I was very familiar with this kind of groaning cry that I've never experienced. Like, in my, 27 years of life, like, I only came across the fact that I could cry in this way around like 24, 25. And so I was crying like that. And it's agonizing. It's it's the worst. And I remember I ended up moving into my bedroom. I just laid down on my bed, probably in like the fetal position, like just whatever. And and I when I cry, I almost feel like I'm looking at God also. Like when I'm in this kind of pain, my attention immediately just kind of goes to him, like mentally. And I'm like, when is this going to end? I remember in the very beginning of last year, 2022, these were like kind of my first experiences, like feeling what I was feeling at this moment, where I just miss my daughter, where just all I want is just to be with her, to have her, to hold her, to kiss her, to be around her. And I can't. For one circumstance, for one reason or another, like I just, in this moment, this is all I want and I cannot have it. I cannot be with her. And so I'm going through all these emotions and they're coming up with the same intensity. And I am just looking like I feel like mentally my eye is always on, okay, like it shouldn't be this hard anymore. Like, so if it's less intense, maybe it's a little bit better. Or if it's not as frequent, maybe things are a little bit better. And so I was just kind of having my moment with God, like very open, very honest, and very very emotional. And I think in those moments I have a habit of asking questions I'll never get answers to. And anyway, so the next day my sister ended up sharing her experience, because I guess right now we're both going through similar seasons. And I came across it on Instagram. And I'm just going to read her caption because it's very relatable to me. She said, I never wanted to even think about what it would be like to not see my kids every day. I never wanted to know what it would be like to come home and not have my boys there to greet me when I walk through the door. But here I am knowing it and living it, and it is very painful. They're with me half the week and with their father the other half. I post about my life so I can look back and reflect and even help someone else feel seen and heard. The disappointment that comes with divorce and separation is a sad reality. All that matters at the end of the day is making sure my boys know that they are loved and cared for no matter what. And to be frank, I feel like the attitude of people, of culture, even some people, like when they're not careful, I can kind of see this in them also. But there is so much focus on the kids in the situation. And there are a lot of natural feelings that have come up in me. And I just feel like there is such an important balance to be had where, yes, the kids are innocent in all of it. And so, they need to be protected. They need to be prioritized. They need to be advocated for. They need to be focused on. And when you're an adult, I think it's a lot easier to not matter, in a sense, or to not tend yourself and your needs and what's best for you. And so I remember, I came across her post and I was just kind of amazed that she could talk about it, that she could be open about it. Because for me, in my case, like even mostly with people close to me, I remember making attempts to just talk about like schedule options with someone in my circle who I consider to be very practical and sensible. And I just like I only had it in me to ask one question, and I couldn't say anymore. Like I would try to come up with words, and the words wouldn't be enough. And I don't know. So I was just, I came across her post. I'm like, I just dealt with this last night. I kind of don't want to have to deal with this. I don't want to see this. I don't want to hear this. I live this. And I'm pretty sure right after I came across that, my cousin sent me a DM, which was pretty much a reel of this woman who was kind of sharing her struggle as a co-parent and, packing her child's things into a suitcase. And I want to see if I can pull it up really quick because that would just be nice to share. I see you kissing them goodbye with tears in your eyes, trying to keep it together. I see you sitting alone in the house that is now empty and quiet. I see you and you're not alone. So she sends me that post, and it's just like, it's literally hitting the mark, right? And she just said, this made me think of you. You're not alone. I love you. And I have this kind of internal struggle because I don't really choose to deal with my emotions in advance. They just kind of come up. And, in this context, it might seem like all I do is talk about my pain. But in reality, like in my day-to-day, it's the last thing I share. It's the last thing that I face. Because it's not easy and it requires a lot of work. And so anyway, like, I was dealing with everything the night before. I get these two posts on my feed or, to my attention. And I feel very hard-hearted in this moment. I feel like stone, and I don't want to think about this. I don't want to feel this. I just don't. And all of a sudden I kind of felt like God said, you haven't mourned this. And I remember my next thought was like, what do you mean? Like I've been mourning for years. Like I feel like that's all I've been doing. And then right after, I kind of heard or got the impression like, okay, you mourned while you were fighting for your marriage, but you haven't mourned this. You haven't mourned motherhood in the way that you wanted to be a mother. And I don't think it's very often that God goes on tangents. But in this moment, I just had a stream of thoughts, like thoughts and images of that season again. Because I think when people hear that I was grieving while fighting, like people might think that I wasn't actively placing my faith in God and in what God said and, his promises, both spoken and written for me, my marriage, my family, my daughter, all these things. But the fact of the matter is that I was. And I was very protective of that. But at the same time, while believing, that God could do something in the future, I'm still facing something presently. And, I would almost compare it to the, that struggle of believing for healing while dealing with sickness. And, so there were a lot of symptoms happening where I'm like, oh man, like, this is hurting. This used to be a thing and now it's not. It's taken away, and these walls are being built up and distance is being increased, and the culture and the dynamic of this relationship is changing. And I had to grieve what used to be normal and learn how to love in the conditions that I was in. So anyway, so I'm kind of having like those mental pictures again, and I kind of felt like there were just so many thoughts after that. Like, you were mourning as you were fighting, and here you are thinking that you spent too much time just dwelling on that one thing. Like, you barely gave yourself time apart from actively fighting for your marriage to just be, to just feel. And then it was like, and here you are upset with yourself, resenting yourself, belittling yourself because you're still in pain. And then I heard these words, like, you give yourself no grace. You give yourself no time. And I just felt like it's not that I can't fully, like, I don't know how to verbalize this, but it's not that God wants me to be in pain, but it's that he wants to be with me, and me, shutting myself down is also shutting him down. Like, I very much got that impression. And I talk about therapy a lot. I've been wanting to go to therapy for forever, and I think only, just now recently financially that might be possible. But a lot of times the way I feel like God was looking out for me these past 3 years through dreams, because dreams were becoming my emotional outlet. I remember, and this is very transparent, I'm throwing myself under the bus and admitting that, this is, I don't even want to say toxic, but it was just a very broken place. I remember when we were first discussing the concept of divorce, and it was like New Year's Eve. I was like, all I want after this is Ava. All I've ever wanted is Ava. The first sign of trouble, all I wanted was my daughter, and all I wanted was to go, right? And I was like, I'm still hurting because this is my husband, and the thought of him with someone else is hurting me. It's hurting me. I can't. Like, I would be so territorial. Like, those are my thoughts, right? And I feel like over the years, through dreams specifically, I feel like God gave me an outlet for what it would be like to be here. I remember having dreams of divorce where I was inconsolable. There was no arrangement that could be made to make me happy. I would, like, in these dreams, like, my feelings were so raw and so transparent and so, like, so open and unrestricted, I guess. Like, these were all things that were like buried inside me. And like, I remember being upset at people within my family, within my community, because divorce sucks, and it's awkward, it's uncomfortable for everyone. And in these dreams, I was like, why is no one doing anything? Why is no one saying anything? Why is everyone just letting this happen? Right? And I have, I've written them down, but I feel like if, like me sharing all these dreams, if you looked at my life, you'd never know that all these things were in, within me somewhere. And I feel like it's only God, and it's only by his grace that I'm not an angry, bitter, broken person. And I have my moments. Like, I definitely still have my moments. But I'm very thankful that I had some outlet, even if it was just in dreams. I'm happy that I had an outlet that was able to just be unfiltered. Unfiltered, yeah. And it allowed me to, like, I think in the previous episode I talked about like how I'm really good at anticipating pain. Well, I feel like these dreams kind of helped me in that regard also. Like, I know exactly which emotions to pinpoint and, place limits on, and which ones to go to God to, and all this stuff. And so I really felt like God was trying to get me to deal with this stuff. I feel like he was inviting me to mourn. And this is a tendency for me. I'm pretty sure it's a tendency for a lot of people. But no one likes pain. No one likes to stay in pain. No one likes to be in pain. Like, I think most of us, we just want to avoid it. And a lot of people are willing to do a lot of things to avoid having to face that kind of thing. We think, like, what's the fastest way to get out of pain? Or, we ignore it, we suppress it. And when we do that, it's very easy for pain unchecked to lead to deeper problems, not only within ourselves, but also for other people and the people that we're around. I remember sharing with a couple very close friends of mine that I just wanted to disappear. Like, I gave them a specific strategy that I would take to disassociate from my life, like, just like not participate in this world with these people, just so I could avoid pain. And it's very irrational. I think it could get to a point where people just simply don't understand, where you barely understand why it is you think what you think or feel what you feel. It's kind of complicated, but for me, in the context of motherhood, I had to check myself a lot and monitor myself a lot, especially last year, because my grief would be so much to lose her. Like, I would give her over to her father, like, in tears. I would cry before, I would cry during, I would cry after. I would cry randomly throughout the week, because my lifestyle up to that point was very present. I was with her. I was involved. I saw her every day. She was mine. 100%. I had 100% authority. I had 100% access. If I wanted to walk over to her room in the middle of the night and pray, I could do that. If I wanted to hold her, I could do that. And it was just very different. And so last year, when I was kind of, just starting out in this process, like, the pain of feeling like I lost her would be so much that I almost didn't want to start this process again the next week. Like, I just wouldn't want I wouldn't want to see her because I knew that I'd have to let her go again. And that was very difficult. And in this case, I was just feeling like God was like, hey, like it's time to deal with this now. And it's time to deal with this intentionally, not just when it kind of comes up, And it's time for us to do this together. Because like me, I'm just like, okay, when can this be over? Like, when can we be done? Like, when can I just be okay? And I feel like that time will come for the most part. I feel like it will become more tolerable. I feel like I will accommodate and evolve to my situation. But in that moment, I just had to let go of what I wanted, because I used to want to be a stay-at-home mom. I used to want to run and build my business. I wanted to homeschool. I just wanted 100% of me to go to the things that I cared about most, right? And now it's like, it's not that, and it's even less of a possibility than it was before. So just kind of coming to terms with that officially. And one of the things that I've had to do, or like I guess the biggest thing that I feel I'm supposed to do is learn how to go to God with it. Not just when I'm in the middle, but almost preemptively, like go to him first, go to him more, and learn how to stay there without having like a resentful attitude about it. I've come across a couple podcasts. One of them was it was like a 2-part series called Give Me Your Ashes. It was on Chris Valentin's podcast. And then I came across a couple other episodes from the Jonathan and Melissa Helser podcast, and they were talking about what it means to be a powerful woman. But in that podcast, they really talked about like emotional intelligence and, the importance of connecting with people, but also how to check in with your soul and how to go to God with that. And a large part of my reluctance to feel is that I don't want to be pitied. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be bitter, and I don't want to be a victim. I don't want people to see me like that. I can deal with little moments of that, but because I don't want that to be who I am, I don't usually I'm not usually very transparent with the moments that those are real emotions. And so my prayer recently has been that God would take away this, or not even take away, but that God would just show me how to live this out without always feeling the need to protect my dignity at the same time. If I can just be free in that way without having to preserve, my reputation or anything like that. Like if I could just be undignified, like in worship or in my emotions or as a mom, like just allow myself wiggle room in that way. Like that's kind of what I've been praying recently. And I remember reaching out to an old friend recently, and I sent her a voice message. I was just like, hey, I just wanted you to know that I'm thinking about you, that someone across the country is praying for you and believing for you. And if, like, I was just like checking with her and stuff. And I was like, if there's anything I can do, let me know. She's like, you can pray for me. And I was like, okay. And she was like, pray that God would give me strength, willingness to obey, and the ability to stay in love despite the fact that I'm fighting a battle. And so now, like, every time that I'm praying that over her, I'm also like kind of praying it for myself, because I just felt like it was just such an awesome and beautiful, powerful prayer request. And I feel like that's I don't know, that's where I'm at. And if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that I am not the only person going through a divorce or, separation, or, dealing with all that stuff with the child involved. But I also know that I'm not the only one going through hard things. And I definitely feel, an invitation from God to invite him in that process. And I just wanted to share a couple quotes that I came across, because I was listening to a lot of podcasts this past month. And so one of these is from Chris Valentin. He was just like, what did he say? He was like, if you want to walk out of your pain, you better embrace it. Another thing he said was, you can't always help what happens to you, but you can always help what happens in you. And at least for me, like, there are some things that I've steadily been doing throughout my process of grief, and all these changes and transitions. And I shared in my previous episode just this struggle with vision and perspective, and being eager and more focused to see what God is doing and what God can do. And so now I just wanted to share a couple of things that I do that might fall into the category of like good mourning. Like, what does it mean to mourn? What does it mean to mourn well? So I think first, it looks like sitting in the discomfort and embracing it for a moment, and just being patient in that moment also. I think it looks like embracing the emotion as it comes, instead of just always trying to shove it all the way deep down. I think it looks like being honest about your honest feelings. So I know I shared that one of the ways I emotionally process was through dreams, and I'm thankful to God for that. But also, like, writing down honest thoughts, honest emotions. I feel like that can be really refreshing, and it helps you to see what needs to be managed and what just needs to be, monitored, I guess. I think it also looks like giving yourself over to God as you are, and giving God everything that you have exactly as it is, not just the good, but also the bad, or also the broken, or also the bitter, like all those things, giving all those things over and asking for his help, because we need it. And I wanted to share this verse really quick, because these are ones that I really held on to. One is in Psalms, or actually a couple of them are in Psalms. So it says, the Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit. Another one says, he heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. And there's this very popular one in Matthew. Blessed are those who mourn, because they will be comforted. Some things that I just kind of do for myself that I'm very careful with is I make sure to continue to allow God to deal with me. I'm not really eager to get to a point where I feel like I can handle everything on my own. Sometimes when I'm getting caught in my pain, I try very hard to remember that this was not God's intention, that this was not God's will. And I can't always understand why things turned out the way that they did, but I can choose to know God in this process. I can choose to walk with him in this process. I can remember his heart and his character and the way that he shows up and cares for me. If I had to choose between going through this situation and going through it alone, or going through the situation and going through it with God, I'd choose the situation where I'm going through it with him. And I say all this like fully understanding that mourning isn't meant to be a lifestyle, and like this doesn't have to be a permanent situation. But I think there's always going to be occasions in life and seasons in life where it's required that we just keep up with our soul. And I just finally wanted to share this last point because I was talking to my cousin yesterday, and she kind of shared that she really liked this verse, and I kind of like it also. It's 1 Peter 5:10. It says, the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, establish, strengthen, and support you after you have suffered a little while. And then after your brief suffering, the God of all loving grace, who has called you to share in his eternal glory in Christ, will personally and powerfully restore you and make you stronger than ever. Yes, he will set you firmly in place and build you up. So it's the same verse, but one's in the Christian Standard Bible version and the other one was in the Passion Translation, and I liked both. And one of the key points that I'm trying to remember moving forward, because it's been a month since this last situation, but you may be mourning, yes, and you may be in pain for a little while, but you will also be comforted. Like there's a blessing in it, a special blessing specifically for you and your broken heart. And not everyone can be trusted with your thoughts. Not everyone can be trusted with your raw emotions. And not everyone can receive you well when you're in a very broken place. But God can. Like God is that person. God is that safe haven. And to be honest, God is aware of it anyway. He just wants you to be willing to be able to hand it over to him and to turn to him first. And instead of turning toward other people instead of turning toward things that would numb that emotion, instead of shoving it down and choking it out, he wants to tend to it, and he wants to care for you in that. So yeah, that, at least for me right now in this season, this is what good mourning looks like. It looks like being willing to sit with it and embrace it when it comes, and hand it over and check in with my soul in the meantime. Be like, how am I doing today? Is everything okay? Yeah, I know this is going to be helpful for somebody, because I think there's a lot of us going through similar situations, at least within my circle. So if you guys think of anything additional you would like me to add, please let me know, because I will likely be writing this in a blog post format, and so this could really be helpful for someone else in that platform as well. And really quick, I just wanted to share the post that I wrote kind of leading up to this topic, where I said I never talk about it because I can't, not without breaking. This past year, now into this year, I was like, why the heck am I still crying? Why, when I am so much happier and so much healthier, am I still dying inside? And I felt like God said, you haven't mourned this. But I've been mourning for years. You mourned your marriage while you fought for it. You haven't mourned this. Motherhood and the way it looks for me now is not as I expected. It is not as I dreamed. It is not what I prayed for. It's a thing a full-time mom simply wouldn't understand. Many things all of a sudden feel like something I'm taking away from the very limited amount of time I have left with my baby. Normal, everyday things. It feels like getting stitches, ripping them off, getting them on, ripping them off, over and over, week to week. So what do? I remember that I'm hurting because family was a value and a treasure of mine. I tell Ava-Lise I love her a zillion times the days I have her, to make up for the days that I don't. I take pictures and videos of my baby, enough to get me through the next week. I cry when I have to, and I fight the half-truth that loving means losing, and reluctantly allow God to walk me through this process of loving intensely and letting go, loving intensely and letting go.
Thank you guys so much for listening. Feel free to DM me to send me your feedback. Check out the description below to follow me on social media. This podcast is listener supported. Don't forget to subscribe. Remember, you are fully known and deeply loved. I'll see you in the next one.